Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Capricorn Shamaness, and I am here today sharing with you divine timing preparation for promotion. Um, Everyone, likes to focus on the petition and the presentation or the manifestation of that which they desire. And then during that span of time, from the point where you make that petition and the time where it manifests itself into your life or into your reality, this is where most of the time, the energy is spent. And where you are during this process is a direct reflection of how close or the distance between you and your manifestation, the timing between when you make the request and when it is fulfilled. And there's that preparation time, which I really think it's a germination time. A time, it's almost like going through the process when a seed is, bringing forth a flower, or when a baby is being born. And during the time that they're in their mother's womb, there's things that are going on. The baby is not just sitting there. It's growing. It's a living being. There are parts of it that are coming into fruition as it evolves from that seed until it becomes a full-blown human being. It's preparing itself to come forth and be able to exist in this realm. And so when during that time when you're asking for something, especially when you're asking for something that's a huge change that's going to shift your reality significantly, it takes time. And I've heard the term divine timing throughout my life, even before I evolved into I guess a spiritualist, if you have to give it a label. But divine timing, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, there are very specific things that are happening in that time. And when you understand what those things are, then there's some parts of it that you get to, control, take control of, have the reins. And when you start to align yourself with these principles that I'm going to share with you in this class, you will see your manifestation start to come about in a quicker fashion, and you're going to see it with a lot less of the stress, the anxiety, and the worrying. Because one of the things that I came to understand as I grew in Goddess and started to learn myself and evolve myself spiritually outside of the Christian religion, I began to understand that when I was petitioning or praying for something, asking for something, after the request was made, I didn't spend my time preparing myself to receive what I had asked for. Instead, I spent my time worrying about whether or not I was going to get what I had asked for. So I want to encourage you to take a different standpoint. And during that time where, rather than being in preparation for what it was that I was asking for, when I was sitting in the midst of the struggle mindset, the anxiety-ridden mind, I was missing the blessing of the journey. I was missing the adventure of the journey. I was missing the triumphs, that the smaller victories that I was obtaining and gaining through this process, because the only thing that I was seeing was the end result, the end vision. And there's so much beauty in the process. There's so much beauty in the process. And also when you're in alignment with what is, what is happening, and when you have an understanding of what's happening, it makes it a whole lot easier for you to move through the process and not lust after the desire, but allow it to just naturally come into fruition in your life. So like I was saying, I came into this awareness, and I also started to understand that it had a lot to do with my Christian upbringing, and the part, questioning whether or not I would get what it was that I was asking for. Well, part of it was this whole concept of, being just a wretched sinner, and being unworthy, of it, based upon the definition of, what that is from a Christian perspective. And I had to put those things into perspective and come into, a more mature awareness of who I am and where I am, and allow it to align with my new perspective. And as I grew in grace and matured in Goddess, I came to the awareness that I am God. So my will is God's will. Because that was another big thing. Is this God's will? Is this God's will? Every time you ask a prayer, you got to make sure it's in God's will. But you have no idea, you're not, most Christians are not having a direct conversation with God. So they have no idea whether or not it's quote unquote in the will of God. And all of the religious antics and stuff that go along with asking for something. The unworthiness, and God did it for me, but I really didn't deserve it. That's very weighty. It's very heavy on the spirit. And so I really had to learn how to put distance between me and that mindset. Really, transforming my mind, moving past it, so that I could manifest what I was attempting to manifest without the limitations of it. Because for me, it felt like limitations. It felt like shackles, like I was being held, like what I was asking for was being withheld, and I was being restrained, so I couldn't even take hold of it. So coming into the awareness that the things that I was stressed about and worried about in terms of whether or not I was going to get what it was that I was asking for, and in that time period where the waiting is happening, the impatience that grew for me. So I wanted to understand, what's this distance? What's the distance in the time? What's happening in this time period between when I'm asking for it and when it's showing up, or when the answer is showing up? And when when I asked the question, I didn't get a timeline, like, this happens and then in this day is gonna, in 1 weekend. That's not what I got. What I got was the different pieces and the parts, the different things that are happening. There's a lot that's happening. There's a lot of creative chaos that goes into play when you are manifesting something, when you are bringing it forth. And so what I'm going to do in this class is share those concepts with you. And when you understand them, as I said earlier, you can easily align yourself with the frequency of your desire.